Hey friends, before we get into this episode, I want to share a quick opportunity for you as a Web3 Academy podcast listener and community member. We have partnered with Lens Protocol. The new version of social media is underway and it's coming in Web3, and it allows you to own your data, own your content, and own your social profile. Lens Protocol is a social graph built on top of Polygon, which is a blockchain. Okay, there are many social media applications like a new version of YouTube, a new version of Instagram and Facebook, all being built on top of Lens Protocol. What this does is when you have your Lens Protocol handle or account, it allows you to access all of these social media platforms being built on top of it, and allows you to move your content and your users and your profile with you from one application to another. You are no longer restricted and stuck into one application like Instagram or Twitter. It is what we believe to be the future of social media and one of the coolest applications to be built out of the Web3 ecosystem. Now, it's not yet open to the public, so you actually can't go and claim your handle. However, our partnership with Lens Protocol is allowing you to claim your handle on Lens Protocol. Here's what you have to do in order to get this. First, you need to subscribe to our Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube accounts. Just head there, click the follow or subscribe button. The links are in the show notes below. Take a screenshot and then head to our Twitter. You'll see a pinned post at Web3 Academy _. Just share those screenshots there, and that'll allow you to get into this whitelist. Now, there is one final step. On Friday, September 9th, 2022, in our weekly news roll-up. This is a podcast we do every single week where we share all the most important news in Web3. We will be giving you one last step that you have to do to actually claim this Lens Protocol handle, okay? So all you have to do is listen in, tune into that episode on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you want, and we will show you exactly how you can go and claim your Lens Protocol handle. Thank you so much, friends, for listening, and I hope you enjoy this next episode.
GM, welcome to Web3 Academy. It is the weekly doer spotlight. I'm Jay Bird, coming at you from Bern, Switzerland today, as always, joined by my co-host, Kyle Reedhead. What's up, Kai?
Hey guys, how's it going today? Happy to be here. Excited for this conversation.
Yeah, we're mega pumped. Today on the show, we have Mel.eth with us. Mel's, got one of the most interesting backgrounds before Web3 and then Web3. Wow, you're just crushing it. I feel like we could talk about anything with you. Let me give a little bit of Mel's bio here. So Mel's a former engineer and architect who worked at banks and was a consultant and did big corporate work for many years. He also played poker for a while and was even a private investigator for a few years as well. We might have to touch on that. Yeah. And then in around his 40th birthday, he decided to retire from the corporate life and dive into DAO full time. So that was April of 2021. And over the last year, he built out one of the most robust governance mechanisms in DeFi at Index Coop, which is mainly what we're going to talk about today. But I just got to also give a shout out to Mel's DGen score. So Mel is ranked in the top 5% of DGens by DGen score, which includes a top 10% Uniswap V3 user, a top 10% OpenSea user. And in his bag are CryptoPunks, Moonbirds, MFers, Meebits, and many, many more. And he's also an original member, I think, of the Constitution DAO. So OG in the space and very active. What's up, Mel? Welcome to the show.
I'm blown away just listening to that intro. I almost didn't know all that about myself. All that in my head at one time, but yeah, how we arrive wherever we get to. Good morning, GM. I'm super amped to be here. I'm double caffeinated this morning, so excuse any extra hype. But yeah, GM.
It sounds like you need that whole reputation on chain. Like you need soulbound NFTs or whatever Disco is calling them, DIDs, I think it is, for all of your different reputations in Web3. That's the next step for you.
It's interesting. I think reputation and on-chain credentialing and is really going to be one of the more interesting kind of things to develop in the coming years. It's a whole new space, and we all kind of come to it. We're all new, in a way. And, so yeah, getting out there, exploring and really kind of developing that identity in a space where you can otherwise be anonymous, is really, really pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's so exciting that it's amazing how everybody that we have on the pod and on the show talks about that interest in that part. And we're not probably, and we'll see, maybe we get into that today in today's show, but it's not the main purpose today. Today is more around governance and DAOs. But before we get into that, Mel, just tell us a little bit about your Web3 rabbit hole story. How did you first fall down the rabbit hole? Was there a moment? Was there somebody who, sort of pushed you in? And why? Why did you decide to dedicate your time and your life to Web3?
It was all FOMO. No, but I'm a bit boomer. I was around, messing around with like Commodore 64s, and I think I was about 10 years old when I got my hands on my first computer, and just very, very sort of long journey short. I kind of came up through, with a little bit of coding, a little bit of hardware. I would rip apart computers and try and put them back together, things like that when I was a kid. But web, the web kind of developed. The internet was, it would take 20 minutes to download a picture when I was, first got there. But there was really no way to really get my arms around that, especially at that age, and really capitalize on that in any way. It was kind of a bevy of knowledge with really nowhere to go other than for my own, purposes. I then kind of abandoned that, went and got degrees, engineering, architecture, worked in that space. I used to joke at my old, at a, kind of a consulting gig for most of the time that I was not in Web3. And I used to joke that, I majored in Excel, that was about the extent of my kind of the requirements of my technical expertise. And then, I get over and, find Ethereum, which is basically a giant Excel spreadsheet. So, but yeah, from there, it was probably around, I think it was 2017 when I first heard about CryptoKitties, and it was nothing more than like a cash grab. I was like, there are people buying pictures for thousands of dollars. I need to get my hands on some of these and sell them to some people for thousands of dollars. And it was that I got on Ethereum. It was completely degen, and I started, buying, selling, and for lack of a better term, procreating with cats. And yeah. And then I made a few bucks and I walked away. It was interesting during that time though. I remember thinking, I used my Excel skills to try and predict what the DNA of the next, cat to be sort of like hatched or born or whatever this thing was. And then it was early pandemic-ish, the merge. The merge is kind of what caught my attention. And for some reason, I always looked at mining as kind of hard, to build miners. It was almost like a captured game in a sense. You needed a lot of capital to really get involved. But validating for some reason, really struck my fancy. So I basically was like, I'm going to validate. I'm going to get my 32 ETH, and I'm going to set up a validator, and I'm going to run it. So I did that. I got everything set up. I went through DAppNode, which is a really great kind of learning tool if you're looking to get involved in any of the sort of hardware side of Ethereum. And then from there, I got bored. I had my 32 ETH. I had my validator set up. I was on a test net, and I was like, what do I do from here? And that's really where things kind of exploded. I built a couple miners. I kind of dipped back into that because I was like, we might be years out from the merge. So yeah, built some miners. I actually had a little mining farm for a while. Got bored again, and really dove into DeFi. And that's really where the curve just went straight up. I bought some DPI, which is kind of like an ETF for DeFi. That product was created by the Index Cooperative. I had some questions. I dipped into the Discord, and the rest is history. That started a 15-month career at Index Coop, which just recently came to an end. Yeah, from there I started out just hanging out, going to meetings because it was a big open organization. I kind of found that as a bit of a technical generalist, I was picking up a lot of information, but I was kind of doling it back out because I was going to almost every meeting. And then I was like, why not write this stuff down? So I started a newsletter, started circulating it in the forum. And then I found people were kind of coming to me, and using that as it became for a while, the primary sort of touch point for people within the DAO. It was a very quick way to get up to speed. And then that really was kind of a natural progression into coordination and governance. Sort of basically did a handoff of the newsletter, which was a really cool experience. It was kind of the first time I'd really started something just organically, got to grow it, and then grow it to a point where I could kind of hand it off and say, please make sure this goes well, right? Like, this is my baby here, and went off to do something else. But started the governance operations working group, all of this with a lot of help. And then the governance operations working group became the governance nest. So it was one of 5 major divisions within the Coop. And our mandate was sort of, keep governance operational, grow the MetaGovernance capabilities, and make sure that communication remains high, on these topics. And that's kind of maybe the last sort of 8 months of the Index Coop journey. Subsequent to that, a lot of self-reflection, kind of what comes next and what do I build from here. I'm sure I missed a ton in there, but that's the story. I'm going to stick to it.
It's a great story. I'm going to give a bit of an explanation of what Index Cooperative is, and then maybe Mel, you can take it to another level. But I'll give the basic one. And maybe there's more to it that I'm not aware of, but I also bought DPI way back in the day when it first launched. That and ETH2X Fly or whatever it was called, which was really good for a little bit, and then obviously got wrecked. So Index Coop essentially is I guess you could say, is making ETFs of crypto. So it finds a category within crypto. For example, DPI is the DeFi Pulse Index. It has parameters and certain things that projects have to meet that are in the DeFi space, and then they can go in this bucket of it's kind of like ETF, I guess, and then you can just buy the DPI token, and essentially you have ownership over all of the, I don't know how many's in there, maybe 12 tokens or something within that. And then I think every month or every 2 weeks, it rebalances the portfolio depending on what has gone up and what has gone down. And it has this for DeFi, it has this for the Metaverse Index. What else does it have? I think it maybe has a gaming index. There's a bunch of them across Index Co-op. Would that be the best way to explain what these are, or is there more to it that I'm missing?
That was a great explanation. So it's just basically on-chain, products, I would say, that help you achieve, whatever your sort of allocation goals might be. I think it buckets up to sort of sectoral indices, which are, a basket of tokens is probably the best way a weighted basket of tokens. And then leverage, which is basically using, I think for the most part, AAVE or Compound as the back end. And you can achieve 1 token leverage positions, like you mentioned with ETH2X, which can be blistering, right, on the way up or down. But that's it really, is making sort of 1 token products that you can achieve your investing goals. I know investing is a word the Coop doesn't like to use for regulatory reasons, but really that's it. Yeah.
And so one of the interesting things I thought about Index Coop, Index Co-op, I don't know what to call it. I'm going to call it Index Coop, but maybe you can tell us what we
that's the biggest question. That's the question.
So what do we call it? You tell me.
I'm a Coop guy. I slipped once and called it co-op, and just the self-flagellation ensued, but rather publicly. But I'd say it's a fairly even split, even within the organization, Coop co-op. But that'll definitely get the conversation started with just about any owl.
Right. And so for context, I think I saw on the website that you guys have about 100 million, or you used to have, but Index Coop has 100 million worth of value within Index Coop, I believe, worth of tokens, I believe is what the number is right now. And what I thought was interesting is that, so I can buy DPI, but at any point I can claim all of the tokens within that I hold, I believe. I never did this, so I'm wondering if this is actually true, but I'm pretty sure, let's say I own 100 DPI. Of that DPI, let's say 20% is Uniswap, 10% is AAVE, whatever percent is whatever. And I can just claim it and it'll give me all of my tokens and get rid of the DPI. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah, it's one of the really kind of cool features of DeFi relative to the traditional space. You know, you
Right.
can't really take your SPY that, you know, issued by, I forget, that's BlackRock or Vanguard or whoever, right? And say, I want all 500 stocks in that basket, you know, in my portfolio. But, you know, 12 seconds later on Ethereum, you can do that with DPI, which is DeFi, MVI, the metaverse, like you said, JPG, which is like it's basically a JPEG index, you know, NFTs, things like
Of course.
that. Yeah.
Now, one of the most interesting things when we talked, so Mel and I actually met at, was it the Permissionless Conference, I believe, in Florida. And what you were saying, and this was just, I did not realize that this was a thing, but so Index Coop technically is holding, and I guess this is on chain, maybe it's in a smart contract, I'm not exactly sure where, but it's holding a lot of tokens of, let's say, Uniswap and AAVE and a bunch of these other sort of DeFi projects, which those tokens hold voting rights within the DAOs and within these projects. And so basically, Index holds a lot of voting rights to a lot of the, it's not even just DeFi ecosystem, but a lot of the entire Web3 ecosystem. And I think you referred to this maybe as MetaGovernance, and maybe this isn't what MetaGovernance is, because I don't actually know. So I'm wondering if you can kind of explain this dynamic, because this to me was just very interesting. I did not realize that this was a thing going on in the Web3 space, but it seems to be a big deal. I just don't know many people talking about it. Can you sort of walk us through what I'm talking about and what this all means?
Yeah, absolutely. So MetaGovernance is, to use a sort of traditional corollary again, to go back to sort of BlackRock, Vanguard, there is a ton of voting power in, you know, whether it be a stock, ETF, index fund, and then, yeah, same thing in the Web3 governance token space. These you know, quote unquote valueless governance tokens that get aggregated in an index, sort of at scale, become quite powerful voting blocks. You know, most protocols take the view that it's sort of a pass-through. So, you know, you don't necessarily see Uniswap going out and saying, oh, you know, these tokens are on our exchange, we're going to go vote with them. However, Index Coop took the position, and I think, again, it was sort of that traditional space corollary, that we should be using that voting power and passing it on somehow. Now, the sort of obvious kind of, you know, jump there is like, okay, if I hold some DPI, I should get to vote with whatever tokens are in DPI. What the Coop did is they kind of levered this up. So they basically ported that voting power within DPI, and that's the only index that's unlocked for voting right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it could go on, you know, MVI, things like there are definitely votable tokens in other indices. ENS is one that really comes to mind, sort of in the data economy index. But and pass that through to Index, INDEX token holders, which is the governance token of the Index Cooperative itself. So if you hold some index and a vote comes up on Uniswap, you can go into the Index Coop snapshot space and express your will as a you know, a token holder, an index token holder, and then based on that threshold, that goes and triggers you know, the vote on the Uniswap side. This is not automated at present. It's basically multi-sigs and things like that you know, execute sort of that will of the DAO. But that's really the implementation that the Coop took, is that, you know, that voting power within the governance tokens in the indices gets ported to index token holders, who can then use it to vote. And then sort of one extension kind of beyond that is proposal power. There are enough tokens in I think it's AAVE, and I'd have to check, because these things do fluctuate through time, but you know, to propose. And that's also incredibly powerful, because that's sort of a gated threshold for most DAOs. You know, they don't want just anybody coming along and saying, hey, I've got an idea, and that you guys should go execute on. So they'll say, you know, you need 60,000 or 100,000 tokens to even put a proposal out there. And the Coop had that power, you know, has that power to go out there and push those proposals out on other protocols, which is powerful.
It sounds very powerful, and I'm curious, and I guess this is what we'll dive into, but is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Because I guess maybe for context, and I don't know if you know this, but what sort of power then does Index have? Like, is it a large percent of tokens that it's holding versus like other tokens that are available to vote on, let's say in Uniswap or in AAVE or in whatever else? Or is it not like is it not that big of a deal? I'm just curious.
It's good or bad that we could definitely get into that. In terms of relative power, I think it is. I think it is powerful to the extent that people pay attention. You know, when you can put a proposal forth in somebody else's really DAO is what we're talking, protocol DAO, to kind of go out there and say, hey, you know, we've taken the view that sort of what you should be doing is this. You know, it raises some eyebrows and people start, you know, it gets the conversation going at a minimum, because it is the hard power that sort of sits underneath kind of that social layer, if that makes sense. And it forces, it might even force a DAO to consider how they want to spend their time, you know, which is a really interesting concept in Web3 relative to like a business, you know, where it's like, this is what we're doing. You all catch a paycheck, let's go, versus a DAO where it's like, we, you know, are going to do these things. But yeah, I think it is appreciable relative to other protocols. So for example, like the amount of tokens on the Uniswap, you know, AMM is just massive. I think they almost have no choice but to make that sort of a pass through of governance, or it almost breaks it. I think that, like, if you look at sort of the BlackRock corollary to Index Coop, it could get, you know, wildly, massive. I think BlackRock has somewhere on the order of like $10 trillion worth of assets. They view this as like a stewardship function, but really, you know, and they take an ESG view. I think that's mainly kind of how BlackRock handles it. They say, oh, we're going to be responsible, you know, almost like that green initiative. The ESG, but how do I put this? You know, BlackRock can be kingmakers. You know, they can install CEOs. They can, you know, deprecate a company if they really want to. Mergers, you know, things like that.
And they do, not if they want to. They do these things. Like they're playing chess basically with the like economies and corporations, and that's kind of part of what they do, right? And it's how they win their bets.
And that's kind of the bet that the Coop has too, is, you know, it's a lot easier to buy some DPI than it is to go out there and develop an opinion about 12 or 16 different tokens. And so as these ETFs hoover up tokens, you know, that power only grows. And so the leverage really, because if that's really what MetaGovernance kind of becomes in this implementation is leveraged governance. You need significantly less capital to go buy some index tokens to go then shove around, you know, dozens potentially, right, of other you know, protocols. And I think in that way, it kind of comes down to this, the potential of the thing is just quite massive. And so there's some demonstrated use cases, and it's only kind of moving in one direction as it seems.
I'm curious who are the people owning and holding these index tokens that are doing these kind of community votes? Because like you see on the BlackRock side of things, okay, it's a centralized company. Are they really doing what's the best interest of everyone? Like probably not, but who knows? Maybe they're good people there. I can see it being a little bit better over in the Web3 side because it's a community of people. It's not one person or like one family that runs it. It's a bunch of people, and what I assume is a DAO. I don't know if the index is a token that's built around a DAO or how people are voting on this, but is it just like mainly people from the Index Coop? Or is it just like a ton of people across the Web3 ecosystem? Or do you know what that makeup is like? Who are the people in there?
I think there's probably, and again, this is a bit of a hot take, but I think there are probably about 4 classes of voters utilizing the index token. It is, in my opinion, a strictly DAO token. There's not much that's automated about the governance process such that it's like a protocol token. Everything kind of is consensus based, and again, multi-sigs go and execute these MetaGovernance endeavors. But I think that I said 4 classes, and now I'm gonna have to remember all those. The founder, the founder has a good amount of tokens. They've taken the sort of view that delegation is the way. So they delegated a massive amount of their voting power to a core team within the DAO. The DAO itself, which does not have a ton of voting power. I think at last brush, it was maybe like 2% of supply. However, again, that delegation from the founder really does kind of bolster them up. I'm going to throw methodologists in there, which methodologists are the ones that come up with basically these index funds, right? You know, to say, oh, okay, you know, the data economy index is a good one that I really don't think I ever would have thought of. But it's all the infrastructure that kind of supports, you know, DeFi and those types of things. And then that third class, and I'd say this is, in my opinion, one of the more interesting ones, is like investors and VCs. Right. And I'm going to throw a fifth in there after this, but investors and VCs, specifically ones that do have a view to get involved in governance. Which really I saw that kind of develop in my time at the Coop. But at first it was kind of the number go up crowd, and it really kind of became, you know, we would like to kind of exert influence within the ecosystem and kind of sit on top of it in that way. And then, yeah, I'll leave it there. There's tons of there's tons of people interested in this thing. Oh, DAOs, other DAOs. That was going to be the fifth one. I think once DAOs started to realize what we were up to, for lack of a better way to put it, in terms of this growing, growing influence in the ecosystem, they almost realized that they could play too. So we saw that develop as well through time. Other DAOs acquiring index tokens to influence their own position within the ecosystem.
Okay, I want to get into, like, I know you're a genius when it comes to governance in DAOs, so I want to talk about that. It's funny to say a genius in this, and like DAOs have only been around for like how long? You've only been in the space for like a year, but it's all it takes, eh? But I want to keep pulling on this because this is so interesting, and I'm just curious. You said there's potential that this continues to grow, right? And people keep, buying up DPI tokens or keep buying up index tokens, and it takes control of a lot of share of, let's say, the entire ecosystem. Tell me why this is a good thing. Like, give me the one side of the story of like why we want this. Like, what if just it gets so big and just everyone buys this one index token, and now like that's the one token that makes all decisions across the ecosystem? Like. Give me the good side first, and then we can maybe see what potentially could happen on the bad side.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there are a ton of mechanisms in DeFi and even externally for exerting influence, kind of full stop. And I think that the pass through of governance, kind of from one token to another, based on sort of aggregated holdings, is kind of just one. I personally don't think we get to that place where it's like Index Coop captures the ecosystem. Okay. However, like if we do, right, how is that a good thing? I'm not quite sure. I think that native holders of their token, there will always kind of, I think, be that distribution and those types of things. But yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think there's two very kind of balanced sides to it, and I think that having influence over, say, another DAO or another protocol is interesting and fine as long as it's handled well. But it also kind of breaks very easily. Most of these governance mechanisms, at every DAO has a unique governance mechanism. I don't care how you slice it. Like no two DAOs are really the same. And to go over and say, hey, we're gonna get involved. We're still so early that a lot of DAOs, could just say no thanks. Right. Hey, it's great that you guys feel this way. It's cool that you went and executed these votes. Now, some of them don't have a choice. They're on chain. So it just, right. If it just break the thing. If if you push through a payload, to say AAVE, that's just not something that they want to do, or it could end up in a weird place. But I think I'm kind of proving the case that it might not be a great thing, I think, based on my rambling here. But I think it's the interesting thing is, I find it, how is it a good thing? It sort of creates sort of a focal point for the conversation. I do think by pressing on kind of the forefront of kind of what can be done in terms of governance, we've really found that the Coop, and even those that have kind of developed around the Coop, and again, because the DAO space is very, almost nobody's at just one DAO. People have been building sort of mechanisms to go and get more direct mechanisms to exert, sort of governance influence, more automated. And that's something I would love to talk about, is kind of governance automation. I think is really kind of one of the bigger unlocks of Web3. But yeah, so I think good things are happening in terms of like one DAO to rule them all. Hopefully not.
Yes, we'll see. I mean, this is the thing. It's an open marketplace, right? So whatever is going to happen is going to happen. And I think if we decide, like, if this thing goes and gets bigger and you guys start just controlling everything and people don't like that because maybe you guys are taking advantage of it, I bet you just other DAOs start to spin up that have a similar idea to indexes, and they start to compete. And then, there'll be a way to kind of figure that out through competition. That's the beautiful thing of an open marketplace. In the traditional world, if this happened, which it does all the time with, companies like Google and Facebook, the government has to come in and go, oh, you have to split apart your company. You can't own Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp because that's too big, And it's like, what? Why? Like, if that's what I did and we made those moves, like, let me make those moves. And, there's the crew of people like, that's good. We need that sort of regulation and people to step in. And then there's the crew of people who are like, no, let's just leave it open and let's see what competition does. And I think, I assume that's what's going to happen here, because I feel like we don't have regulators, this type of regulator in the space that can come in and just say no.
There is the ability to kind of push back, I think, in code. I brought this up kind of in the beginning, but the implementation that the Index Coop shows is kind of a pass through to index token holders, whereas like Uniswap, for example, it's a pass through and through. If you hold tokens in the Uniswap AMM, for the most protocols, you can still vote with those tokens. Whereas we could see in the future, and this is kind of I would imagine almost like a worst case scenario for the Coop, where let's say Uniswap says, we just don't want you guys involved in our governance. It could become almost like a blacklist type of event, where it's like, hey, everybody else passes this power through directly. You guys kind of channel it, and we just don't enjoy that. And so, or maybe there's a bad outcome that, there's a knock-on effect or things like that. So I think it only works as long as it's handled well, is kind of kind of where I see it going.
Right. Is there anyone else practicing MetaGovernance, or is everyone else pretty much passing through?
So there are others practicing. I think it's a bit different implementation. So yeah, in terms of like an ETF, a fund, those types of things, I think the Coop is pretty much the biggest game in town. I'm not sure about the only, but other DAOs have really been exercising their kind of MetaGovernance influence based on tokens they have mostly in their treasury, I would say. So I know one example of this was FAE, the tribe acquired a massive chunk of index tokens to get FAE listed on AAVE. And so really it's kind of cool, because that is MetaGovernance. They used tokens in their that their DAO owned to go and do something more broadly. Yeah, so I think we are kind of seeing MetaGovernance in the system, but it's kind of different everywhere you look. I know like Rabbit Hole, for example, more of like an education kind of endeavor. Was going out and doing some MetaGovernance voting and putting out really good content in terms of why, and sort of their principle-based approach to that, and but didn't have a ton of power to a ton of voting power. So it's almost like you see different sort of it does matter, right? Like how much how much how long is that lever? I guess is kind of the question. Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to come up with more examples, but I can definitely drop you some for the show notes if you want.
Cool. This sort of brings up the topic that Vitalik writes about and talks about, which is one token, one vote, right? And we're seeing kind of indexes going, okay, one token, one vote. Like, let's have the most votes. Let's have the most tokens kind of thing. And that's really the idea of MetaGovernance. But that begins to change when you start to do things like what Optimism did, which is we're going to have sort of this two-pronged approach to governance, where we're going to have these, like, I think there's soul-bound NFTs on one side, and then they have the tokens on the other side for like sort of the community as well to vote. And like they just hold different powers to actually vote for the Optimism DAO. I'm just curious on your take of like, what are you seeing as the best forms, or what do you think this goes in terms of governance? Is it going to continue with this one token, one vote? Or do you like the idea of what Optimism did? And I think Vitalik was one of the people who has been writing about that and like pushed for that sort of thing. Curious what your opinion is on this whole sort of space.
That's such a massive question. I'll try and pick it apart a little bit.
Well, you're double caffeinated, right? You should be okay.
No, right? I think that one token, one vote is a pretty good corollary for what we've experienced for the last couple hundred years. If you buy some shares of, I think the first stock I ever owned was PepsiCo, and it was like 10 shares of PepsiCo. And I would get, something in the mail every so often that was like, it was usually a board election. Who do you want the board member to be? And I was like, I don't even know who these people are. I don't care. I think one time I mailed it back and I was like, yeah, vote. It was like a proxy vote for whatever they recommended. And that was kind of my, that's kind of where we're at with token voting, if you think about it. The difference, we have automated execution of some things, which is really pretty cool. But to then kind of skip to where's it going, right? I think the ultimate goal of these headless organizations, right, is pushing out good decisions, kind of moving through the ecosystem in a way that's sustainable, that is going to, kind of just improve their position through time, things like that. And how do you get a bunch of, just a ton of individual perspectives to kind of aggregate and then move a whole body of contributors forward, or to continue to perform and sort of enrich the participants, if it's more automated, things like that. And I think there's a lot of answers in there, but I think one of the big ones is that the early design of a system, and this kind of gets into mechanism design, tokenomics, things like that. A lot of questions that come up are, do you need a token? And a lot of times the answer is no. You need something, but it oftentimes isn't a big group of people saying yes or no to everything. I think that makes a pretty good sort of base layer fallback mechanism. If you think about, a democratic state as opposed to kind of a democratic organization, we in the United States, we elect a president every 4 years. We elect our other representatives, and that's, again, it's kind of a representative based system. And that's a one person, one vote thing. And that's another really tricky topic with in crypto and Web3 is, personhood and things like that. But it is kind of that one-to-one, almost as like the base layer of legitimacy, if that makes any sense. However, the day-to-day, we don't want to know, we want things to go well in general as the population that kind of legitimizes these things and wants to push it forward. But we don't necessarily want to be involved in the things that we feel should be automated, or the things that we feel should be delegated to others. And so really the question in my mind is, how do we push for those automations that we think make sense once we hit that critical mass of, go ahead and automate this, make the speed limit 55 on highways, make the, so it is kind of that type of conversation within a DAO, right? Are we at a point where we can all agree enough times that this should be automated? And then once that happens, do it. We don't have to come together to decide this every time. You set up standards, principles, things like that, and you start to move to this situation where you're not asking people for decisions on a regular basis. You're leaning on the code, you're leaning on precedent. But I do think it is important to kind of have that fallback where you get to say, this isn't serving us well. And then you hit that critical mass of scale where enough people are saying, this isn't serving us well, let's go out there and change it, and to kind of have that ability to put a proposal forward. It's hard because there are, again, like 2 token systems. There are, NFTs plus, ERC20s, straight NFT systems, optimistic governance, basically, you have to put your hand up to say no, whereas right now, most DAOs default to no action if nobody kind of puts their hand up. So there's a ton of I guess, again, I'll use the word mechanisms to kind of get from A to B that are out there. But what crypto really kind of allows is the expression of that in really sort of way more robust ways than, traveling a few days to another city to vote, 2000 years ago, or mailing in a ballot, or, it's instant. You can get consensus, in 12 seconds, whereas that just wasn't available to us before. And I'll close with this on that topic. I hear there's a lot of, I guess, pushback on, token-based voting, given that we just got it. This is like, this showed up a couple of years ago, and already it's oh, this isn't the way, or this isn't going to be the way in the future. I don't think we've even really touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we can do with token-based voting. So yeah, I do think it's really interesting. It's definitely where my brain lives. Like I think about this stuff all the time. But I also do think it is kind of tricky, and you do kind of have to go back to, kind of go one level down, like what are we trying to achieve? And I think it is good decisions at scale. And not everybody's always gonna love the outcome. But I think when you do kind of zoom out and you look at a DAO almost as like an organism moving through the ecosystem, maybe it does get us to really good places, because we do get that aggregation of inputs, of that diversity of views that quickly, that you really wouldn't be able to get otherwise, if you say, hey, person that we've elected, go figure this out for us for the next X amount of years or whatever.
Well, I want to talk about your views on sort of DAOs and your idea of, I think I read a thing of you explaining that it's, you look at them not like a business, but more like an organism, which I think is super interesting. And I want to dive into that. Just one more question on this token voting though. And then Jay, I think you had a question as well, it looked like. One of the things that I notice in DAOs is you don't need everyone, so you don't need everyone voting on everything, right? There are some people that are more experienced and more knowledgeable in certain areas. And just like in a normal company, if it was to do with finance or something, you would probably go to the finance department to answer and decide on what the best move is for X. If it's a marketing decision, you'd probably go to the marketing department. Yeah, in DAOs, what I often see is like, let's go to everyone. And it's like, to me, I don't understand why that makes any sense. And I don't know if all DAOs do that. It's just kind of what I've seen. And if it's one token versus one vote, like, I don't really know how you would even exclude that or change that, because it's just, if you have the token, you can vote regardless of who you are, or what your experience is. Maybe you've seen something different there, but like, do you think that that's an issue and that's the way that DAOs should be? Is just like, let everyone in the DAO vote? Or like, should DAOs be trying to find more ways to get the right people to be voting on the right things? If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a ton in there, but I think that I'm stealing this term from Chase Chapman, but really it's the unbundling of the CEO. It's not necessarily a headless organization. It's just, as you put it, like, everybody can get their say if that's the implementation that's out there. Right. If 60,000 people hold tokens, you might get 60,000 individual, views, thumbs up, thumbs down views coming into a decision. How to make sure that governance is being pushed to the right places, as opposed to making sure that capital is kind of being moved around in efficient ways. Man, that is the most interesting question of our time, I think, because everybody looks at tokens and says, oh, they're worth something, they have value. I think very few people look at tokens and say, man, look at all that governance power. I think that sort of that one token, one vote, type of one of the problems that arises is I think we look at these systems and equate them to kind of the old systems, like where it's like 51% gets you there. And that's interesting, from a whole organization perspective, where it's, you have to take the whole organization with you with a decision, is 51% the right amount? You sort of get into these parameterization questions. But it's tricky. I think the best answer I can give at this time is, it's something that I really do think whoever is designing the the tokenomic system, the governance mechanism for a DAO or for a protocol really needs to consider is, if they're votable tokens, are they ending up, based on natural incentives, what people are going to do based on the value conversation? Will there be a critical mass of votable tokens kind of in the hands of those that are inclined to make good decisions long-term for that organization? I think a lot of DAOs have tried to solve this problem. I know, like staked AAVE versus just vanilla AAVE, things like that. It kind of gets you to a place where you identify those that are sort of intrinsically motivated to, or at least have a longer time preference, vote locking, things like that, to kind of incentivize those that have that longer term view, that are willing to put their capital and tokens at risk. And even the other side of that conversation, incentivizing those that are making those decisions. This question comes up a lot in governance circles, but should delegates be paid for voting? So yeah, it is a bit tricky. I know most organizations, CEOs are the highest paid person. I think you'd struggle to find a DAO that's pushing out most of their revenue to voters. But why not? But I think we might get there, because at the end of the day, if you're making good decisions, you're probably going to succeed.
Right.
I think right now a lot of DAOs are saying, hey, let's delegate this out, or let's move towards a more, I hate the cringy term, but like more centralized model, because we can be a little more agile. We can, and we end up, a little bit more of a republic than a democracy in terms of these kind of Web3 organizations. And maybe that's fine for now. But I think the size of the opportunity is so much larger than that to kind of get your individual view automatically kind of passed into actionable action.
Can you just unpack AAVE stake versus AAVE vanilla for our listeners for a second there? Because I think that's an interesting example.
Yeah, so basically, you have to, if you want to vote on AAVE, I might be misrepresenting this, so I'll give my kind of best understanding and just couch it as that. But staked AAVE, to my understanding, is kind of votable AAVE, and so if you stake your AAVE, you get a vote. Whereas if you just want to participate in the value side of holding the AAVE token, at that point, it's not really a governance token. You're a value participant. I came up with this term, value voyeur, a while ago, and I know it's a little like I'm almost making a judgment, right? I come from the governance side. I became a governance maxi over the course of my time. But there are those that participate for the value, and there are those that participate because they want to push in some direction, exert influence. And so yeah, it's that, and it's one hop, right? You're locking up your tokens. I don't think AAVE has like a time lock type of mechanism, so you can unstake them and go sell them. But it's a signaling kind of mechanism, as I see it, where it's like, I'm more interested in hanging on to these tokens and voting than I am in day trading, or whatever the case may be.
I think there is like a time period for you to unstake. Like I think it takes like 20 days or something. I mean, it used to when they first started staking, because I remember I was playing around with it. I don't know if it still does that, so don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I feel terrible. I'm showing my ignorance. There's so many systems out there, so many different vote mechanisms out there, and they change fairly regularly.
Don't worry, I just learned what MetaGovernance was 20 minutes ago, so it's all good, man. We're all learning on the fly here.
So true.
Okay, so you gave some great examples there of what DAO governance needs to think about, and I think I just want to sort of ask you this general question. You can take it whichever way you want. Of if you were starting a DAO or early on in a DAO, and you were recommending or consulting them from the governance side, what would be your recommendations? What would you tell them are sort of key considerations for them to think about?
I feel like I'm about to give away all the secret sauce of the Mel.eth consulting, tokenomics and governance consulting agency. But
no, this is how you get clients.
we'll paywall this part of the podcast. Is that possible yet? Can we do that? Now it just stops and it goes, if you want to hear this, if you want to hear this, you need to buy this NFT to unlock the rest of the podcast. Great idea.
Why does it need to be an NFT?
Yes, it doesn't.
No, I think just some real kind of high level, future founders, please take heed. No, I think I think you really have to think through kind of a lot of things, but not the least of which is whatever the early governance mechanism is, you're gonna have to live with that. You're probably gonna live or die on that in the first couple months as a DAO, maybe within the first year, and then from there, I think life cycle planning really is one of the most kind of important things that needs to come into play when you're thinking about spinning up a DAO, and then perhaps even spinning down a DAO at those early stages. I know Kyle, you kind of hit on this, but I do kind of think of DAOs as more correlated with an organism than a business, and so
explain that for us.
Okay, I can go on that little tangent, but I think that if you think about 2 people or 100 people or maybe even hundreds of thousands of people coming together to coordinate towards a common goal, my brain kind of goes more towards like bees and animals that coordinate. But even if I think about the fact that the human body is really it's trillions of cells, that it'd be nice to think that all of my cells are so altruistic that they just want to see the whole of me move forward. But somehow these systems come together, they coordinate, they specialize, and then these words come out, and I can go about my day. I think of DAOs and protocols and sort of this kind of this new mechanism of trustware and kind of moving us through time as a bit more of an organism corollary than a company one, in that if you look at the blockchain as sort of the ultimate in kind of true data availability, kind of maybe the mempool, right, as holding state, and then if you think about AI analytics, that ability to really kind of look out into the future, which as humans, this is kind of what we do. We are just nonstop future casters, really. You kind of have this this new way of moving big groups potentially of humans through time in really cooperative ways, and in ways that I think we've tried through time, right? Like, I think democracy as an institution is just incredible over the last couple hundred years. The fact that you do look at like a democratic country, it is, as long as everybody keeps agreeing, headless. You elect somebody to represent, but their legitimacy is derived from the parts, and I think it's very much the same way like with a human. Like if some part of your body decides to go rogue, which again, this is kind of a disease, cancer, those types of things, the whole thing can derail. But I think as long as it's clicking, and working, and you can get everything coordinated, then you really do have this way to kind of push really maybe individually motivated participants, individually specialized participants. And again, this gets into like, subgroups within the larger group and kind of how they all coordinate. But I feel like I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but I think that that's kind of it, is like in an organization sense, I think we come together more with that, what they call biomimicry, more like bees coordinate maybe than like you see, like a CEO with that sort of top-down implementation of this is what we're going to do, so at least it helps me to think through it. I don't know if it's the most sort of metaphor, but it at least helps me get the picture a little clearer sometimes.
I've seen David Hoffman from Bankless. He wrote an article about Ethereum and how he compares it to sort of like a plant ecosystem, and everything built on top of it are just plants that are growing. And I love these sort of just mental models for crypto and Web3. I think it's super helpful. But I do want you to go back to Jay's question, because I think it was an amazing question, let
me bring it back here, actually,
sure.
Because I think you nailed it in one of the lines you just said is, and I totally agree, DAOs do have the potential to move humans into a form of coordination like never before, right? That is, I think, the big unlock that we all see and we're all so excited about is this, oh, wow, I can work with thousands possibly. And I don't know, I have yet to see necessarily like firsthand examples of this. I'm only in a few very small DAOs, so I haven't been in DAOs with thousands of people, but I think we can all see it, right? Thousands of people working together, common goal, amazing. Okay, how do you achieve that though? What are the considerations? What are the frameworks necessary to get there? Because I think that's where there's this huge gap right now, right? Other than some protocols where it's such a clear mission of what they're building, so it makes it almost easier to coordinate around something. And devs also tend to have more experience, I think, with working together in decentralized ways, GitHub being a great example of that. So, but what about all these other DAOs that we're trying to spin up, and how do they create this? What frameworks do they use to create this human coordination?
Yeah, it's almost infinite. You bring up an excellent example with kind of devs and GitHub, and I think of the academic world, right, where there is sort of this free sharing of information and knowledge, really unlike the business space, where it's incredibly siloed, and where you almost your secrets are your advantage, in a business sense. Whereas that interoperability and cooperative sort of ethos is the advantage of most DAOs, but yeah, different mechanisms for kind of coordinating and moving forward. That's a great question. I think what you really hit on there is scale. Scale matters a lot. I think as an individual, it could be hard to get through a day as an individual, right? When you then partner up, right? We see, whether that be, small family units, relationships, things like that. All of a sudden you have to start communicating. You have to start, expressing kind of intention, right? I'm going to do this thing. And then you develop trust. And then from there, based on, common experience and performance, you can get to a place where you can scale, where you can say, okay, he's done this thing X amount of times, like he said he would. How do we get to a place where we can all kind of say, we're going to do these things, and, develop that trust. And, maybe then you have, a small club or small business, things like that. And then from there, you get to large organizations, to nation states, things like that. I think that blockchain just really powers the ability to scale those things without developing the social layer of trust. Where without that, I might not have the same, I might not have gone through the same thing you went through. However, if we're just doing a token vote, that's probably fine. So I think it allows us to really kind of put a layer of trustware underneath almost any endeavor, that requires human coordination, especially if it's distributed, outside of like geography, where we can sit across the globe and maybe talk about something, maybe come to some agreement, and then maybe demonstrate that we agree in some way, using this trustware, again, whether it's tokens or whether it's, and again, whether they're fungible or non-fungible, or kind of whatever that implementation is. I think it's going to get a lot more frictionless as we go. I think that the issue right now, a lot of it, in my opinion, is these things are really heavy. Like to go on Snapshot, to vote, to get out your ledger, to I think that we're going to find that there are probably varying degrees of kind of transparency and I don't think everything's going to need to be you go and you execute a vote that costs gas on chain to kind of prove your point, right? It might be a toggle on your cell for most DAOs, let's say, right? Could you imagine if every contributor gets an app and it's just, hey guys, we're thinking about hosting our annual conference in these 3 locations. Where do you want it to be? You just it takes 2 seconds of your day, and as opposed to you have 3 meetings about it, you all have to go vote, those types of things. So but I do think it just helps, it all just kind of helps us move towards these places where we can kind of trust the decisions that are being made by a large group.
Outside of governance, what are the things that you think make a successful DAO? Is it communication and being able to communicate, like, especially if it's getting large? As you said, the whole purpose of these DAOs, not the purpose, but like the big unlock is that you can scale, right? And you can scale into large numbers and be able to work together and coordinate together. And so, like, obviously governance is important, and whether that's tokens or NFTs, whatever, we'll figure that out and we'll keep experimenting. But I'm just curious, when you see hundreds or thousands of people working together, is it communication that really matters? Is it the tech stack, which you kind of said, like once you start to like make it easier for everyone to do, it just automatically becomes better? Is it just the community, the culture aspect? Is it just that they have a good mission and they're all working towards something specific? Like, is there anything you're seeing that is, or you think maybe you hypothesize that really truly matters here? Or is it just a combination of everything?
Yeah, I just want to say like yes to all of that. In terms of the what if I had to give maybe some order of importance though, I think that having a really solid mission, is kind of critical. I would say that kind of part and parcel of that is like very principle based rules for working together. Really the thing there is kind of, how do we act absent direction as an organization? If I, as an individual, claim to be a participant in this endeavor, how am I representing that endeavor broadly? How am I communicating with the people inside of that organization? I think that empathy is one of the greatest qualities that a DAO worker can really have, is trying to understand what's happening on the other side of the the aisle. But that all kind of goes down to like you said, communication. And really, as I see it, you kind of build that stack through time. You communicate about what it is you'd like to be doing, and then you kind of you make a decision and you move on. And it's the ability to trust that decision that you're kind of executing on that allows you to go make the next decision and then kind of move on, right? So I think that there are a lot of things that kind of come into play in terms of how these organizations move forward effectively. But maybe as like a blockchain corollary, right? If you can build that block of, hey, this is what we understand, and these are our marching orders. And then you have this iterative sort of, okay, we go out for a season, is how we refer to it as the Coop, and we execute, right? And then we come back, we self-reflect, we decide how we're going to move forward for the next 6 months, and we execute, right? You sort of build that, that foundational kind of trust, that data availability. And not only does it give people within the organization confidence that you can do that thing, right? That you can move a leaderless organization through time, but it gives external parties that confidence as well. And then that sort of as an extension of that, you really get into external communication, not just the quote unquote like inside thoughts of the DAO, but how is that DAO communicating externally when any participant could be the person communicating, or if somebody comes to any DAO contributor that maybe just even self-identifies as hey, I'm part of the Coop now, because that early on in DAOs you really do get a lot of that. How is the DAO presenting, right? And I think you get this, it can feel a bit kind of frenetic or maybe even schizophrenic to most external parties. Yeah, communication and communication standards probably are one of the more important sort of second order things. Once you get the, hey, what are we all doing here? And that's usually that founder level, design type of consideration. How do you keep the whole thing humming? That is the question.
It's so interesting because most guests that we've had and many leaders in the space say very similar things: the importance of mission and vision, the importance of a strong brand or communication, or that internal knowledge of who you are and what you stand for, and the ability to go out and speak it to the world. But yet it's hard to do that. It seems to be, it's easier to focus on, I think about Simon Sinek, right? It's easier to focus on what you do than it is to focus on why you do it, right? And I think that that holds very true. So it's great advice. But I hope people actually go do it, right? Because I think what we see so much is just that focus on product, ship, build. And I'd be interested to hear your take on this. The thing I find, because a lot of the things that you've talked about throughout this episode have been almost, I've gotten a sense that you would recommend sometimes that there's a pace that needs to be carefully thought of. And I think what happens, and I sort of get your take on two sides to pace, what happens within an organization, particularly a DAO, is as you bring in more people, pace increases exponentially, because you just have more people active and people just want to push, and it gets hard to maintain pace, right? So it'd be interesting your take on that. And then the other side of that, I think, is what about the pace of us as individuals working in DAOs? And how do we take care of ourselves while being in this ecosystem and not lead to burnout, which I think is a problem that we're seeing a lot.
Yeah, no, that's such a really good call out. Even from a personal experience perspective, when there's really nobody there to slow you down, there's no standard workday for a DAO worker. If anything, it's quite the opposite. I know, my Discord availability was holistic, while I was at the Coop. And I did try and make a great, my sort of ascension was through starting the newsletter for the DAO. And, we had a pretty robust APAC region, meetup. And I would stay up, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning to just make sure I was catching that, because being in those meetings was just a heck of a lot different than reading a 2-paragraph summary about those meetings. So kind of keeping oneself healthy, like saying, okay, that I can only help this network if I'm a healthy node in this network, really, I think is important. And kind of communicating out, that is important. So the ability of the whole to kind of make sure that the constituents are staying, well fertilized. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for there, but just making sure that everybody is kind of staying healthy. I think that also goes a little bit to kind of what you were touching on before, where, as these organizations scale, there is sort of that constant look, and again, like the developer coding away might not be thinking about this, but what gives these things legitimacy, is kind of the question, when you build that sort of like foundational stack that's going to move these organizations forward. On one side you have sustain, right? You need to sustain the thing. How do you not get wrecked? How do you not make the one bad decision that's going to take down the whole DAO? How do you make sure that one person isn't even capable of making one bad decision that can take down the whole DAO? You see it sometimes, like if a CEO has a meltdown, that really affects a company. And again, because DAOs are a little bit more permissionless, you have to have those considerations. And then on the other side, growth. How do you make sure this thing is pushing forward? And I kind of think of that as it's like two sides of really the same coin, because I think you end up with that specialization pretty early on in an organization where the terms kind of suck, for lack of a better term. Like I think if you look at the quote unquote community manager, right, of a DAO versus the quote unquote like lead dev of a DAO. Well, it's like, I know which one I'd rather be, but which one's more important? I don't know. You could probably switch out the lead dev and lose a week. You can't switch out the community manager. They know everything about how all of it works, those types of things. So that question of sustenance versus growth, one really allows the other, but we don't think about it that way too often, because it's like, oh, we've got the superstar, we're good. We've got Banteg, we're fine, or we've got, so you end up in these places where you end up with these incredible, how do I put it, like a mismatch almost. It can develop in terms of the importance of the various functional areas within a DAO. But ultimately, it all kind of comes together. It all kind of needs to rise together. You kind of need to come up through develop as an organization in that way. And really give sort of that proper weighting and importance to the pieces. I'm not sure what question I'm still answering at this point. I kind of just went off there.
No, I think you bring up a really valuable lesson around I'm trying to think of the word, like the philosophy of growth, right?
Yeah.
Growth for growth's sake isn't always a good thing, and we as humans need to be reminded of that, and particularly in the space of tech that we operate in, growth for growth's sake you can get carried away in that. And so I think it's a good reminder to founders and to everybody involved in the DAO to just write some of these things down and to remind each other of them, because man, you can get completely carried away, and then, like you said, then you're an unhealthy node, not properly fertilized, or not bringing honey back to the nest or the hive. I'm not sure what the analogy is, but if you can't do that, then then you're not assisting. So yeah, it's a great reminder.
Yeah, no, it is. It's like I said, it helps me think about these things in a way that promotes sustainability, and that helps promote growth. And I think that, man, we're in a space where there's tons of mental models out there, but I don't think that there's any that's the DAO mental model, right? What's the ideal DAO mental model? And I don't even think we have half the vocabulary we need to really even talk about these things in a way that feels like we're having an adult conversation about DAOs. And and again, I
feel like we're having an adult conversation right now. I don't know.
It's by far the most adult conversation I've had about DAO.
So are you currently writing at all? Are you trying to create a mental model around this hive concept, or do you have you put anything down to paper?
I have. I've written down a lot. In terms of pulling that together. I'd say I'm at various stages. I think one of I'm going to admit what I feel is perhaps a mistake to this point. Most of my writing has been fairly constrained to this point because it exists within the Index Coop forum. So I kept everything fairly targeted. I tried to keep it, keep it clean, if that makes sense, right? And focused on one organization. I was a one DAO contributor. We had a lot of external relationships, so I really got to sample the space, I would say, but from the perspective of being within one of the largest DAOs in DeFi. Now, where to go from there, who knows, but I do think when I kind of look out into the future, writing is one of the more interesting things. I think that the communication touch points kind of moving forward are going to be kind of what define, like I said, the vocabulary of the space. And I told you guys to stop me if I get too laser-eyed about governance, but here we go. When I think about early on, when democratic states were developing, there were really sort of like influential writers and players in that space. When I think about the types of organizations that informed, what the most robust, democratic states of today are, There were people that kind of, you have to write these things down. You have to have those conversations. And I think one of the hardest realizations for me as well, like kind of coming into it, was you don't get from A to Z, in a day, right? You don't walk into the woods for 5 years and come out in a week. And I think that all of this stuff does need to be built on a foundation, right? And I think it has to be a foundation of understanding and agreement in terms of how we want to move these things forward. But building for-profit endeavors that mimic sort of the social constructs that we have around, legitimizing group rule, for lack of a better way to put it, is so new, just so very new, that clumping together concepts to say, oh, okay, here, I think I understand this in a way that, that the world at large needs to see and understand better, so that we can all kind of move forward in a better way. I think a lot of us are trying to do that. I'm in a ton of Telegram chats that have the word governance, in the title. And a lot of it right now, I'll be completely straightforward, is frustration. These things are hard. Governance is hard. How we organize ourselves is really hard. And how you take just unbound self-interest, on the scale of billions of people, and focus that up in a way that gets us to a place where we can all, not just live together, but maybe get to the moon or whatever we're trying to do, right? And it's a challenge, and it's probably where I'll spend the second half of my life, digging around. But that's a very long-winded answer to, I do hope to write more in the coming months.
Well, I tell you what, once you have written it and gotten it down on paper, we'd love to be part of sharing it, and we'll definitely share it with our community. We'll either get you back on the podcast, or we'll promote your writing, because I think that you're really onto something that needs to be shared more. But for today, let's wrap up here. I've got a couple speed round questions for you, and then I want to give you a chance to just tell people where they can find you, where they can connect with you. There's always going to be people that are very interested in diving deeper into many of these topics, which I know we could have today. But for speed round, unless Kai, are you good? Do you have any more questions? Awesome. Okay. What is one token, fungible or non-fungible, that you will never sell?
Ooh, that's such a good question. Hang on, let me take a look at my tokens real quick. I don't think I'll ever sell all of my Ethereum. Everything else I think is on the table. Actually, this is going to be such an off book answer here, but I am a big fan of crypto swag. And along with everything I managed to buy, which is extensive, more so than I'd like to admit, from the Meta Factory, that you do get tokens with that. And I almost view it as like it points in a video game more than who knows, if they go to the moon, everything's on the table. But for some reason, as I watch those Meta Factory tokens accumulate, it just makes me smile. I don't know if I'll ever sell them.
Okay. Awesome. Sorry. So wait, I don't even know if I know what crypto swag is. What's crypto swag?
Oh, it's basically hoodies and all the.
Okay, that's what you mean. Okay, I wasn't sure if you meant like a token to call it crypto swag. Okay, I got you.
But man, talk about an idea. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, awesome. Favorite person to follow on Twitter or to follow their newsletters? Favorite person to that you're learning from right now?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I'm gonna immediately say a few, but if I had to pick just one, I really like Kevin Owocki, in terms of just Gitcoin and governance, and just really kind of nails it in terms of even the hot takes seem to be pretty well thought out. The other person, this is a bit nuanced, but I don't know if you're familiar, Frog Monkey, who came out of Bankless, really thinks pretty deeply about governance and and just in terms of a person, I could talk to him for hours. And then a guy I worked with at the Coop, Sean Grubb, is, in my opinion, like one of the best sort of operators in the space, in terms of I can be a bit scattered. I don't know if you've noticed. Sean has the ability to like really focus up and but also maintain sort of that broad view of kind of the importance of all of these things and what gives them legitimacy. And he's put out a ton of good writing on MetaGovernance and all of it. So would recommend checking that out if you get a chance.
Awesome. We'll include links in the show notes to all three of those. A final speedrun question. If you had a billboard, which 1 billion people were going to see, what would you put on that billboard?
Wow. I'll note I had no time. There was no prepping for these questions.
No.
Billboard, man. I did have a billboard at one point. Early on, Justin Aversano was putting up billboards in Miami with CryptoPunks on them.
That's right. Yeah.
My CryptoPunk at the time was in Miami. So I guess that answers that. But wow, if I had a billboard, man, that's so hard. I would say maybe initiative is everything. I think, or intentionality is kind of the gift really that we have, I think, as humans, right? And just kind of maintaining an awareness around how we're spending our attention, right? Because it is paying attention, right? So really, I think what I put on that billboard is maybe like, live intentionally, if you're coasting, you're probably going downhill, so just keep moving.
I love it. It's a bit of a long billboard, but we'll make sure it's nice and big. So
it's a QR code that gets you to
Oh, amazing. Okay, awesome. Mel, this has been such a delight, such a pleasure. Want to just give you a sec to tell people where they can find you. If there's anything that you're working on that you want to let people know about that we haven't talked about already, go ahead.
So I'm currently in a bit of a self-exploration phase of where I want to go with all this stuff. But Twitter, EMJICY, MGC is my Twitter handle. That's probably the best, most consistent place to find me. Mel.eth will get you to some of the writing, especially like the Index Coop forum, things like that. Some of my thoughts on some of the more nuanced thoughts on MetaGovernance, things like that. But yeah, I'd say Twitter for right now is the best place to get in touch. DMs are open.
Fantastic. Mel, thank you so much for coming on the show. Can't wait to have you back or to share more of your writing as you get that down on paper. You're clearly thinking about this the right way, and we really appreciate your contribution to the space.
No, likewise. I really do appreciate it. Any institution, person that really kind of drives the conversation forward and provides education in the Web3 space, I think is really kind of tops. And the way you gents do it is, in my opinion, one of the better ways. So thank you, and I really do appreciate the time and the opportunity and giving me a home to express these wild and crazy thoughts. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Mel, and thank you, listeners.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy. We hope this helps you along your Web3 journey. And if it does, please share this episode and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. By the way, if you have yet to join the Discord community, you are missing out. This is where all the magic happens. This is where we learn, where we ask questions, where we network. You want to be in there. The link to join is in the description below. And finally, a quick disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast was financial advice. Crypto and Web3 can be risky. You can literally lose it all. In fact, if you invest on account of what we say, you probably will lose it all. So don't do that. In all honesty, the point of this podcast is to remove the noise of markets and price and focus on utility and implementation anyway. So you should not take any of this as financial advice. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.